The rain fell over New York like a quiet confession, heavy, endless, unforgiving. Peter Parker stood on the edge of a broken rooftop, staring at the city he once swore to protect. Every light below him felt like a memory he couldn't reach anymore. The sound of thunder was softer than the silence inside his heart. Tonight, the mask didn't matter. The man behind it was the one bleeding. He had been here before, in this very spot, watching over the same city. But something was different now. The streets that once gave him purpose now whispered reminders of what he had lost. Every face in the crowd below was a reflection of his guilt. And somewhere deep down, Peter knew that the hero everyone admired was already gone. A siren screamed in the distance. It wasn't his problem anymore, not tonight. His hands trembled as he looked at them. The same hands that once saved lives, now stained with the weight of all the people he couldn't. Every rescue, every promise, every failure replayed behind his eyes like a cruel film that refused to end. He closed his eyes, and the memories came rushing back. Aunt May's smile fading in a hospital bed. MJ's voice whispering his name before everything went dark. And the final message she left that he could never bring himself to listen to again. The pain wasn't sharp anymore. It had turned into something quieter, something that hollowed him from within. The city didn't mourn for him. Why would it? Heroes come and go, but grief stays. Peter had saved thousands, yet couldn't save the few who mattered most. The cruel irony haunted him more than any villain ever could. Somewhere in that vast ocean of lights, life moved on, but his didn't. The storm thickened, wind slashing across his face as if the sky itself was trying to break him. He wanted to scream, to tear the mask apart and end it all. But heroes don't get that choice, not even broken ones. The world doesn't see the man, only the myth they built. A memory flashed, Uncle Ben's voice echoing through time. With great power comes great responsibility. He used to believe those words were his compass. Now they felt like chains, binding him to a destiny he no longer wanted. What's the point of saving a world that keeps taking everything from you? His knees gave way, collapsing under the invisible weight he carried. For a long moment, he just knelt there, the wind roaring, rain soaking through his torn suit, his mask lying in the puddle beside him. He wasn't Spiderman anymore. He was just a man trying to survive his own ghosts. In the silence that followed, something shifted inside him. Not hope, not yet, but a spark of realization. Maybe pain wasn't meant to be erased. Maybe it was meant to be carried, to remind him of what once mattered. The thought scared him, but it also stopped him from falling further. As dawn began to break over the horizon, Peter stood once more. The light hit his face, soft and hesitant like forgiveness. The city was still broken, and so was he. But maybe, just maybe, both could heal. One small act at a time. He picked up his mask, not to hide behind it, but to remember why he ever wore it in the first place. The morning light crept through the cracks of the city, washing away the rain but not the heaviness in Peter's chest. The world had awakened, but he still felt trapped in yesterday. Every rooftop, every alleyway whispered fragments of his past, the laughter he missed, the promises he broke. Somewhere in the distance children were playing, their laughter echoing against the walls. For a moment he envied them. They didn't know what it meant to lose everything. He walked aimlessly, his footsteps echoing softly against the wet pavement. Without the mask, he was invisible, just another man among millions. People brushed past him, unaware that the stranger they ignored had once bled for them. He wondered if this was what peace felt like. Silence, emptiness, and no one calling his name. His reflection in a store window caught him off guard. The tired eyes, the faint scars, the hollow stare. This wasn't the man who once believed in miracles. The Spider-Man suit beneath his worn jacket felt like a burden, not armor. He looked away, unable to face the truth of what he'd become. Heroes age too, just not the way people think. As he wandered deeper into the heart of the city, he passed by a group of reporters surrounding a screen. The news was playing footage of a burning building, screams, fire, chaos. The anchor's voice was cold and factual, like tragedy was routine now. For years he would have already been there, But now he just stood frozen, watching. Then he heard it, a child's cry. It wasn't from the screen. It was real, close, desperate. He turned instinctively, his pulse quickening. Old instincts never die, no matter how broken the man becomes. The sound came from a narrow alley. Smoke, debris, a woman shouting for help. Without thinking, Peter ran. The building was collapsing, flames swallowing the walls as he pulled the child from the rubble. The mother screamed his name, not Peter's. "Spiderman!" And something inside him cracked. Even without the mask, they recognized him. Maybe because pain leaves its own kind of light. For the first time in months, his hands didn't tremble. They acted. When the chaos settled, he stood in the middle of the street, holding the soot-covered child. People were clapping, filming, crying. But none of it mattered. What mattered was the heartbeat against his chest, fragile, alive. It reminded him of why he ever became Spider-Man. Saving one life had always been enough. Later, as he sat on a park bench, the city skyline stretching before him, he felt the ache return. Not from exhaustion, but from memory. He thought of MJ, how she used to smile after every mission, telling him that saving one person could change the world. He wanted to believe she was right. Maybe she still was. That night, he stood atop a high tower again. The same city, a different man. The air was colder, but his heart was steadier. He realized something. Heroes aren't made in victories. They're forged in pain. What he lost didn't define him. What he still chose to protect did. As the wind brushed across his face, he whispered softly into the night. "For you, MJ. For all of them." The words faded into the dark, but the meaning stayed. Somewhere deep inside, hope was breathing again, fragile but alive. It was enough to make him stay standing. Night fell once again, wrapping the city in a restless hush. Peter stood beneath a flickering streetlight, staring at the burned building he'd helped save earlier that day. The smell of smoke still lingered in the air, sharp, bitter, familiar. The news had already moved on, the world already forgotten. But for him, the echoes of that moment still burned inside. Saving that child had reawakened something he thought was dead, the part of him that still believed in purpose. He found himself walking to the old neighborhood where Aunt May's house once stood. It was gone now, replaced by a gray apartment block, lifeless and cold. He stood there for a long time, his thoughts loud enough to drown out the noise of traffic. He remembered her voice, calm and gentle, reminding him that strength wasn't about power. It was about endurance. That no matter how heavy the burden, you keep walking. He closed his eyes and whispered, "I'm still walking, Aunt May." As he turned to leave, he noticed a mural painted on a nearby wall. Spider-Man, mid-swing, with the words, "You kept us safe." He froze. The paint was fading, the edges chipped, but it hit him harder than any punch ever could. People still remembered. Even when he couldn't forgive himself, the world hadn't completely forgotten who he was. It was strange how hope could hide in the cracks of forgotten walls. But not everyone saw him as a symbol. A few streets away, a group of men watched from the shadows. They recognized him, not as a savior, but as the man who failed to stop them years ago. Their leader, a scarred face with cold eyes, smiled cruelly. "Spider-Man's alive," he muttered. "Let's finish what we started." The city's ghosts were stirring again. That night, Peter felt it. That uneasy pull, that old instinct warning him something was coming. He ignored it at first, pretending it was just his mind playing tricks. But the city had its own way of whispering warnings. A scream broke through the night air, sharp, terrified, close. And just like before, he ran toward it. When he reached the alley, it was a trap. Chains, smoke, and a dozen figures waiting in the dark. A voice echoed, cruel and mocking, "The great Spider-Man, saving strangers while his own life burns." Before he could react, they attacked. Fists, pipes, fury. His body moved from memory, blocking, striking, but he was slower now, weaker. Every blow reminded him of what he'd lost. The fight was brutal. He took down most of them, but the leader's knife cut deep across his shoulder. Pain shot through him, but he kept going, refusing to fall. Blood mixed with rain, the city watching in silence. Finally, the last man fell, groaning on the ground. Peter stood panting, broken, his mask soaked red. For a moment, the silence returned, heavy, final. Then the leader spat blood and said the one thing that broke him. "You couldn't save her then, and you can't save anyone now." The words cut deeper than the knife ever could. Peter froze, every muscle trembling. He wanted to deny it, to scream, but the truth was heavier than air. For the first time in years, tears fell through the mask. He left them there, not out of mercy, but exhaustion. As he stumbled through the rain, the city blurred into streaks of light and shadow. Every step hurt, every breath burned. But through that pain, something changed. He realized that no matter how much he bled, he was still standing. Broken, yes, but still standing. And maybe that was enough. When he finally reached the rooftop again, he collapsed, staring at the stars hidden behind clouds. His voice was barely a whisper. "I'm not done yet." The wind carried his words away, but his heart heard them. It wasn't strength he found that night. It was defiance. The kind that comes when you have nothing left to lose, yet still refuse to fall. The next morning came quietly, sunlight spilling over the city like a reluctant apology. Peter woke on the same rooftop, aching, sore, his wounds half-healed but his spirit strangely awake. The night's violence still echoed through his bones, but beneath it was something new. Resolve. He wasn't proud of what he'd done, but for the first time in a long while he didn't feel empty. Pain had become familiar, almost grounding. He bandaged his shoulder with trembling hands, staring at the blood-soaked cloth. Each scar told a story, of failure, of sacrifice, of love lost, and lessons learned too late. Once he thought strength was about saving everyone. Now he knew it was about surviving what saving them cost. The city didn't need a perfect hero. It needed someone willing to rise, again and again, no matter how many times he fell. Later that day, he visited an old friend, Dr. Connors, one of the few who still knew Peter behind the mask. The doctor's lab was filled with half-finished experiments and old guilt. When Connors saw him, he froze, concern etched across his tired face. "Peter, you look like you've been through hell." Peter gave a faint smile. "Hell's where I've been living." They talked for hours, about loss, redemption, and the thin line between saving others and destroying yourself. Connors listened, then said quietly, "You don't have to carry their ghosts alone." Peter wanted to believe that. "But how do you let go of people who died because you weren't fast enough? Because you hesitated for a second too long? Guilt doesn't fade. It grows roots." That night, Peter sat by the window of his small apartment. The city lights glimmered like broken stars, reflections of the people he once saved. He took out MJ's old pendant, cracked but still beautiful. His thumb brushed over it, and for a moment he could hear her laughter again, that sound that once made the world feel right. He whispered, "I wish you could see me now." "I'm trying." But peace is never permanent for people like him. A sudden explosion shook the distance, another call for help. His body tensed, instinct taking over. Yet he hesitated, staring at the mask on the table. Every time he put it on, he risked losing another piece of himself. Every time he ignored it, someone else paid the price. The choice was cruel, but it was his alone. Finally, he stood, pulling the mask over his bruised face. Not because he wanted to be Spiderman again, but because he had to be, because someone needed him more than he needed his rest. The wind roared as he leaped from the balcony, the city rushing up to meet him. For the first time in months, it didn't feel like falling. It felt like returning. He landed near the wreckage. Fire, smoke, chaos. A bus had overturned, trapping civilians inside. Panic spread like wildfire. Without thinking, he tore through the debris, lifting metal, calming screams, guiding people out. His body screamed in pain, but his mind was silent, focused, alive. This was who he was meant to be, not because of power, but because of choice. When it was over, he stood among the survivors, his suit torn, his breath ragged. A little girl ran up to him, clutching his hand. "Thank you," she whispered, eyes full of hope. In that single moment, every loss, every scar, every sleepless night felt worth it. Maybe he couldn't save everyone, but saving someone still mattered. As he disappeared into the shadows once more, he realized something powerful. He didn't need the world's forgiveness. He needed his own, and maybe, just maybe, that was the beginning of becoming whole again. The city would always be broken, but so was he. And somehow, that made them belong to each other. The night grew heavy again, thick with mist and memories. Peter stood at the edge of a rooftop, watching the city pulse with restless energy. The faces below blurred together, lives moving forward, unaware of the man who watched them from the shadows. He had saved so many tonight, but peace still refused to come. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw MJ, Aunt May, Gwen, the ghosts that never left him. They weren't haunting him anymore. They were waiting for him to forgive himself. But fate had other plans. Down below, a familiar voice echoed through a back street, deep, cold, and venomous. It was Mark Doyle, a crime lord whose brother died years ago during one of Peter's battles. To the world, it was a tragic accident. To Mark, it was murder. And now the man who once controlled half the city wanted revenge. "He took everything from me," Mark growled into his radio. "Now I'll take what's left of him." Peter heard the words, his heart tightening. He had known this day would come. The past always finds its way home. He could have run, disappeared again, but he didn't. Instead, he stepped into the light, the wind brushing his torn suit. "If this is what it takes to end it," he muttered, "then let it end tonight." The trap was already set. Gunfire, explosions, chaos bursting through the streets. He moved like he used to, faster than thought, stronger than pain. But something was different. Every move wasn't for glory or redemption anymore. It was for peace. The men kept coming, but so did he. Each hit, each fall, each moment of exhaustion became a reminder that survival was his only revenge. Then Mark appeared, calm, smiling, a ghost in a suit. His eyes burned with hatred as he pointed a gun at Peter's chest. "You think saving strangers erases what you did to my brother?" His voice trembled between rage and grief. Peter lowered his guard, breathing heavily. "No," he said quietly. "Nothing erases it. But killing me won't erase yours either." The words hit harder than bullets. Mark hesitated, his finger shaking on the trigger. For a split second, Peter saw something human in him. Pain, loss, the same agony that drove Peter himself for years. And in that fragile silence, Peter did something unexpected. He stepped closer. "We both lost people," he whispered. "Don't let it turn you into what you hate." Mark's eyes filled with tears, but the hatred wouldn't die. He screamed and fired. The shot rang out, sharp and final. Peter staggered back, the impact slamming through his shoulder. Pain roared through him, white hot, but he didn't fall. He stood tall, bleeding, defiant. "If this is what I have to bear to protect others," he gasped, "then let it be mine alone." Sirens began to wail in the distance. Mark dropped the gun, trembling as police lights painted the walls red and blue. For the first time, he looked broken. Not from defeat, but from the realization that revenge had given him nothing. Peter collapsed to one knee, his blood pooling beneath him, but there was peace in his eyes. The war outside was ending. The one inside was beginning to quiet. As they took Mark away, Peter leaned against a wall, clutching his wound. The city's noise faded into a dull hum. He thought of MJ again, her words, her warmth, her belief in him. Even when you lose everything, don't lose who you are. He smiled faintly through the pain. He hadn't lost. He was still standing, still fighting, still him. When the night finally stilled, he looked up at the stars breaking through the fog. They were faint, scattered, barely visible, but they were there, and somehow that was enough, because in their distant light, he saw the truth he'd spent years avoiding. Even in darkness, there's always something left to guide you home. Days passed in silence. The hospital room was dim, filled with the rhythmic hum of machines and the faint smell of antiseptic. Peter lay still, staring at the cracks in the ceiling, counting them just to feel time move. His shoulder ached with every breath, a cruel reminder that being human came with a cost. He had faced bullets, fire, betrayal. But this stillness, this quiet recovery, felt like the hardest fight of all. Heroes weren't meant to rest. They were meant to rise, even when their bodies begged them not to. Dr. Connors visited often, his eyes tired but kind. "You were lucky," he said one morning. "A few inches to the left, and we'd be having a very different conversation." Peter managed a faint smile. "Luck's all I've got left." The doctor didn't reply. He just nodded, understanding that the wound inside Peter ran deeper than any bullet could reach. Some injuries don't bleed. They echo. At night, Peter dreamt of them again. Aunt May, MJ, Gwen. They stood in the distance, watching him. No accusations, no blame, just silence. He wanted to run to them, to ask for forgiveness, but his legs wouldn't move. When he woke, tears burned his eyes. Maybe forgiveness wasn't something you begged for. Maybe it was something you had to earn by living. Weeks later, the doctors said he could walk again. The first steps were slow, painful, but determined. Every step felt like reclaiming a piece of himself that had been buried under grief. He didn't look in mirrors anymore. He didn't need